हरे कृष्णा। नमो विष्णुपदाय कृष्णप्रेष्ठाय भूतले श्रीमते भक्तिवेदांत स्वामिनिति नामिने। नमस्ते सारस्वती देवे गौरवाणी प्रचारिणे निर्विशेष शून्यवादी पाश्चात्य देशतारिणे। जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर शिवासादि गौर भक्त वृंद। हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे हरे, हरे राम 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 हरे हरे। हरे कृष्णा. So we welcome you all back for the day 2 of this course, self-evaluation tools on the path of bhakti. I hope the first day's discussion was useful, and today we will continue on this discussion. As I mentioned before, this book is based on this course is primarily based on the book Madhurya Kadambini by Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, and mostly we will be following that material with some additional material from Bhagavatam, Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu and other such literatures, Bhagavad Gita. I will just add some material, but the primary flow of discussion will be based on the book Madhurya Kadambini by Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur. As I mentioned before, this is a book which was compiled as a self-evaluation tool for practicing sadhakas to evaluate where they are in their devotional journey and how they can make what they need to do to make necessary transition from where they are to the next stage. Very, very interesting book, which is based on these two very important verses by Srila Rupa Goswami. Adav Shraddha tata sadhu sangha atha bhajana kriyo atha anartha nivritti syat tato nishta ruchis tata asakti ato bhava ato prema. So in this way, the 9 stages have been described by Srila Rupa Goswami. But interestingly, except for bhava and prema, the sadhana bhakti more or less he describes in detail, but he does not delineate these individual stages from Shraddha to Asakti. He does not elaborate on them very in detail, but Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur very kindly elaborates on each of these stages so that we can identify where we are. And he further divides each of these stages into subdivisions so that even within that, like for example, a huge long stage like Anartha Nivritti has been divided by Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur into 5 or 6 further stages so that we can see our progress even within that long stage, which will give us some inspiration that yes, I am doing some progress on the path of even Anartha Nivritti. I am making a tangible progress. So that's what we will be seeing now. And this first chapter, we are still in the first chapter where Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur describes the super excellence of Bhakti Devi, how Bhakti Devi, of all the processes, Bhakti is the most prominent and the most potent process. That's what we have been seeing till now. I'll do a very brief recap of what we have covered till now. First, we started with Mangalacharan, where Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur glorified Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu by comparing his mercy to be the Mahamadurya Kadambini. He says, Nirankusha Mahamadurya Kadambini, the uncontrolled cloud bank of exquisite sweet nectar. And then he appreciated Srila Rupa Goswami for, amongst all the other Vaishnava acharyas, he specifically appreciates Srila Rupa Goswami for showing the whole world the nature of bhakti, the nature of bhakti rasa. Bhakti purvai shritastam tu rasam pashyedyadatadi. He has given the eyes for common devotees also to see and appreciate what this bhakti rasa is. And then in the second theme, Srila Rupa Goswami, Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur discusses this theme of how the highest understanding of absolute truth is Akhila Rasamrita Murti, the person who is perfectly capable of reciprocating with all the living entities in different kinds of rasas. And the third theme that we discussed was that how the Lord and Shuddha Bhakti are self-manifest and independent. So in this topic we discussed little elaborately, at least we were in the middle of this discussion. Almost towards the end we didn't have sufficient time to complete it. So I will do a quick recap of what we have seen in this discussion. So this discussion talks about how does one receive the seed of devotion. As we hear, Brahmande Brahmite Kona Bhagyavan Jeev, Guru Krishna Prasade Pai Bhaktilata Bij. So what is this Bhaktilata Bij? What is this seed? And how does one receive it? That's what we have been trying to explore here. So in this exploration, we discussed that how wherever bhakti is described in the Shastras, especially Srimad Bhagavatam, the terminologies ahaituki, yadrichaya are always seen, and also the common observation is that most of the people do not take up to bhakti, only very few take up to bhakti. Why is that so? Why some people receive it and why some people don't receive it? So this is what we were trying to understand, and in this theme we tried to see that how the word ahaituki is commonly coming in various different verses of Srimad Bhagavatam, where it describes the nature of bhakti. Ahaituki apratihata yayatma suprathidati savai pumsam paro dharmo, or kurvanti ahaitukim bhaktim ittam bhuta guno hari, like that, various such verses we saw. And we saw that there are two prominent meanings of this word ahaituki. One is causeless, meaning literally no cause, or another meaning is self-causative, which means it has no other cause other than itself. These are the two meanings of ahaituki. And then we explored this word yadrichaya. So yadrichaya also comes in many places. Yadrichaya matkatadav jata shraddostu sevane nanirvinno nati sakto bhakti yogosya siddhida, and so on. This word yadrichaya also comes in many such many verses in Srimad Bhagavatam. And we saw that there are two prominent meanings with individual shades within it. For example, yadrichaya means by chance, by luck. And then within that one may say, what is the reason for luck? It could be luck caused by piety, or it could be causeless luck. And yadrichaya also means independent will, yad ichaya. But then the question arises, whose independent will? So it could be the independent will of Krishna, it could be the independent will of the devotee, or it could be the independent will of the receiver who is receiving that seed of bhakti. So yesterday we started this exercise of exploring these 5 options while trying to see if the ahaituki condition and the condition that and if you are able to explain why do some people receive bhakti and some people do not receive bhakti. So we tried to explore these 5 options yesterday. I think we reached till the 4th option and we had to stop in between. So the first option that we tried to explore was, one receives bhakti by luck generated by piety. So why do some people get bhakti, some people don't get bhakti? Oh, these people are very pious and these people seem to be very impious. Therefore, the cause of their luck is their piety. If someone makes such a statement, it cannot be, we saw yesterday that how it cannot be substantiated either by Shastras, Shabda Praman, or by practical observation, Pratyaksha Praman. So we saw yesterday that how if anyone has had any experience in preaching, you can see that sometimes very, very sinful people do take genuine interest in bhakti, and after taking up to bhakti, they give up their bad habits. And sometimes you also do see that apparently very pious, gentlemanly people need not necessarily take up to the path of bhakti. So this is viruddha to pratyaksha, or this is beyond our, this is not commonly observed. Even though sometimes you may see sinful people rejecting bhakti and pious people accepting bhakti, but if you statistically see, you cannot substantiate that always an impious person will never take up to bhakti and pious person will take up to bhakti. So common observation indicates that piety or impiety does not seem to really affect one's chance of taking up to the path of bhakti. And then this is also, we saw, not shastrically supported, because we saw many verses like Kirata Honandra Pulinda Pulkasha, where it mentions that these very severely sinful people, if they surrender to the lotus feet of a devotee, they can take up to the path of bhakti. And we saw Apichet Suduracharo Bhajate Ma Mananyabhak. These are the verses which indicate that actually even sinful people can take up to bhakti, practice that path and eventually get purified. Therefore, the first option we rejected, or rather Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur rejects it, that one cannot say luck caused by piety could be a possible reason for someone to take up to bhakti. This was the first option that we discussed. Then we discussed the second option, that luck means luck. You don't try to explore the reason for luck. And it is not seen in convention also. When you say someone, oh, you are a very lucky person, that person never asks back, why am I lucky? Luck means luck. Luck means costless. So one may explain that way, that costless luck is the cause of someone taking up to bhakti. If you present such a proposition, this is also not agreeable either by the Shastras, and it would make preaching actually redundant. As we saw yesterday, Krishna glorifies preaching. Nacha tasman manushyeshu kaschin me priyakrittama bhavita nacha me tasmad anya priyataro bhuvi. He says, my dear Arjuna, there is no one who is more dear to me than that person who spreads this message of mine. The gopis glorify that person who spreads the message of Krishna. Bhuvi grinanti ye bhurida jana. Shravanamangalam Shrimadatam Bhuvi grinanti ye bhurida jana. They say that whoever spreads this message of yours is certainly the most munificent person. So if preaching is glorified in scriptures, if sharing Krishna consciousness with others is glorified in the scriptures, then you cannot say that devotees share just for their own self-entertainment. That cannot be the reason. So therefore, it is indicated that costless luck cannot be the cause of someone taking up to bhakti. In that case, that would make preaching absolutely redundant. At least preaching to newcomers would become redundant if one gets bhakti by costless luck. So that second option also we had to reject. This is what we saw yesterday. Then we explored the third possibility, that one gets bhakti by the independent will of Krishna. So if this is the case, then Krishna would be accused of being partial, of giving bhakti to someone and not giving bhakti to others. And because this would be serious partiality, because the only way of escaping this material world and attaining everlasting happiness is actually by taking up to the path of bhakti. So if Krishna allows access only to some people, that too whimsically, then that would not make Krishna a very attractive person to worship actually. That would make the Supreme Lord very partial. But Krishna clearly says, Samoham sarva bhuteshu name dveshosti na priyaha ye bhajanti tu mam bhaktya mayi te teshu chapyaham. He says, I am equal to all, O Arjuna. I do not specially favor anyone, nor do I hate anyone. So Krishna makes it very clear. And ye bhajanti tu mam bhaktya mayi te teshu chapyaham. But one who worships me, I am in him and he is in me, or I offer myself to him because he offers himself to me. It is natural for a father, as we discussed yesterday, to be more benevolently disposed towards his own son. Even though in general he may be very, very munificent, very charitably disposed, willing to help anyone who comes, but nevertheless, even such a most benevolent father will have more benevolence towards his own son, and it is not considered to be a fault in that person. So this we saw yesterday. So therefore you cannot say that Krishna's independent will could be a reason for someone to get bhakti. So now, then we started exploring this fourth option. So this fourth option is that someone could take up to bhakti because of the independent will of the devotee who is sharing that bhakti, of the devotee who is preaching. So we started exploring this option. So why someone gets bhakti and someone does not get bhakti? Because the devotee chose to share that bhakti with someone, and he did not choose to share this bhakti with this other person who did not get bhakti. Now again, we saw that we might immediately get into the problem of the devotee being partial, just like the Supreme Personality of Godhead. But we discussed yesterday, no, the devotee cannot be accused of being partial because the devotee cannot be omnipotent like the Supreme Lord. The Supreme Lord, if he desires to give bhakti to anyone, just by his Satya Sankalpa Shakti, just by desiring, the other person will get bhakti. He does not have to do anything. But the devotee is not omnipotent. The devotee is not omnipresent. While he is in a particular geographical location, he has to concentrate on preaching there. That's how he can transform hearts. And the devotee is also not, he is limited in his skills, he is limited in his time, he is limited in his energy. So therefore, therefore he will have to optimize with the available resources, with the available time, energy and skills. He will have to choose his own audience to be most effective in delivering Krishna consciousness. So therefore, if a devotee does not concentrate on a particular class of people or a group of people to give Krishna consciousness, rather chooses someone else, it need not be due to partiality. So therefore, you cannot accuse a devotee of being partial. Now, then we will have to evaluate whether, if this is the case, then is the ahaituki condition fulfilled? Because ahaituki had to be fulfilled. And we saw two meanings of the word ahaituki. One is causeless, another is self-causative. So if the independent will of the devotee is the cause of bhakti in someone else, it is certainly not causeless, because there is independent will becomes the cause. Is it self-causative? If you see, is independent will of the devotee the same as bhakti? Not necessarily. But what is the cause of the independent will of the devotee? Is compassion. Is compassion to serve. As we saw in the same Gopi Geet verse, Tava Katamritam Tapta Jivanam. Again, compassion is just one of the qualities of a devotee, but compassion is not the same as bhakti. Therefore, still the ahaituki condition may not be fulfilled. But that is also superficial. If you probe little further, what is the cause of the devotee being compassionately disposed? The cause of that compassionate disposition of the devotee, we saw yesterday, is bhakti. Yasyasti bhaktir bhagavatya kinchana sarvair gunes tatra smasate sura. So, whoever practices bhakti develops all good qualities including compassion. So the cause of compassion in the heart of the devotee, because of which he is sharing his Krishna consciousness, is ultimately bhakti only. So therefore, it is bhakti in the heart of the devotee which is the cause of bhakti in the heart of the receiver who is receiving it. So therefore, bhakti is causing bhakti. So in that case, it is self-causative. So the ahaituki criterion is also fulfilled. So you can explain how bhakti is yadrichaya, by the independent will of the Supreme Lord, by the independent will of the devotee. How it is ahaituki, it is self-causative. And again you can also explain why do some people get bhakti and some people don't get bhakti? So this proposition seems quite alright. So one gets bhakti by the independent will of the devotee is certainly not incongruent with the ahaituki and yadrichaya nature of bhakti. But then a very important question, a roadblock is that then if you say the independent will of the devotee is the cause, then the question is the devotee willing independent of the will of the Supreme Lord? Is the devotee acting independent of the will of the Supreme Lord? If you say yes, then how can such a person be a devotee who is acting whimsically, who is acting independent of the will of the Supreme Lord? That cannot be true. Or if you say no, he is not acting independent of the will of the Supreme Lord, then ultimately it is not the devotee's will, it is the Supreme Lord's will only. So if it is the Supreme Lord's will which is acting through the medium of the devotee, then ultimately then the Supreme Lord becomes partial. But this is not true, because in the Shastras it is mentioned that the Supreme Lord is the only supremely independent personality in this whole universe and in the spiritual world, the only supremely independent person. But out of love, the Supreme Lord voluntarily surrenders his independence to the devotee. So when it comes to sharing whom to share bhakti with, even though the Supreme Lord has all independence, but he voluntarily surrenders that independence to the devotee. And he says, you are my retail distributor. Whomever you choose to distribute, you can distribute. But ultimately, what he is distributing belongs to Krishna. But whom to distribute, that discretion the devotee has. So in this way, Brahmande Brahmite Kona Bhagyavan Jeev Guru Krishna Prasade Pai Bhakti Lata Bij. So the Guru's Prasad is in distributing it. And Krishna's Prasad is ultimately Bhakti is his own Kripa Shakti. It's his own Antaranga Shakti. So it is Krishna's mercy that is getting distributed, but the mercy of the devotee is in actually distributing it. So in this way, the apparent contradiction is resolved. Now, this is where we paused yesterday. Now, the question arises, is the devotee distributing bhakti? If yes, then what does it mean to distribute bhakti? If not, then what is he distributing? This is very important to understand, because whoever is sitting and listening to this description has already received bhakti and they are practicing bhakti, and in your own capacity, which may be limited or huge, you are trying to share bhakti with others, especially with new people. So what exactly are we sharing with others, and what have we received? Actually, Srila Rupa Goswami mentions that it takes many lifetimes of accumulation of what is called as Agyata Sukriti for it to transform into what is called as qualification for bhakti or bhakti. And that qualification for bhakti is faith, Shraddha. Faith means what? So when can you say that someone is a devotee? He should have these 4 kinds of faith. Faith in the devotees. He should feel, I should spend the rest of my life associating with these people, these devotees. That is the first element of faith. The second element of faith is that faith in the books. I should read these Bhakti Shastras, Bhagavad Gita as it is, Shrimad Bhagavatam. These are the books which can help me progress in my devotional life, in my spiritual life. This is the second element of faith. The third element of faith is faith in the process of bhakti. If I want to progress in my spiritual life, I need to practice Shravanam, Kirtanam, Vishnu Smaranam, Pada Sevanam, Archanam, Mandanam, Dasyam, Sakyam, Atma Nivedanam. You should have full trust that I can progress by practicing Navada Bhakti alone. This is the third element of faith. And fourth is faith in the parampara. I trust that what these people are practicing is coming in a bona fide parampara starting with Krishna. So, faith means it has to have these four elements. So, if a person has these four kinds of faith, then he is qualified for bhakti. He may not have started to practice the limbs of devotion also. That is fine. But if he has this faith, because in the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, Srila Rupa Goswami says, Yak kenapi ati bhagyena jata shraddosya sevane na nirvinno nati sakto na vairagya bhagasyam adhikari asau. In Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, Srila Rupa Goswami says, that person, jata shraddha, who has developed faith, asya sevane, in serving the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And how does one develop this faith? He says, kenapi atibhagyena. Kenapi atibhagyena, he translates as by impressions arising from previous association with the devotees. So, when devotees approach a new person, what they try to do is they try to expose him to some element of devotional service which he might appreciate wholeheartedly. It could be prasadam, it could be chanting, it could be music, it could be something as simple as good friendship. Like if a devotee establishes a friendship with a non-devotee, and if that non-devotee really starts appreciating that friendship, that benevolent friend who happens to be a devotee, then what happens is that he gets a very favorable impression which is called as Agyata Sukriti. So when that Agyata Sukriti accumulates more and more and more and more and more and more over many lifetimes, Srila Rupa Goswami elsewhere mentions that it takes many lifetimes of accumulation of this Agyata Sukriti to actually mature into what is called as Shraddha. And this Shraddha becomes the qualification for that person to practice bhakti. Adau Shraddha, tata sadhu sangha, ata bhajana kriya, then anartha nivritti, nishta ruchi, asakti, bhava and prema, like that. But the beginning is actually Shraddha. But Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur further divides these 9 stages into 14 stages. And he adds 2 more stages prior to the stage of Shraddha also. Because here we are trying to understand if receiving bhakti means to receive Shraddha, we should understand how does one receive Shraddha? How does one become a Shraddhavan? So that needs to be understood. So he says, it all starts with Satam Kripa. Satam Kripa means mercy of the devotees. When the devotee feels, oh, this person, it would be so wonderful if he takes up to bhakti. I should do something to help him take up to bhakti. So he thinks like that. That is where this whole process starts. Satam Kripa, a compassion in the heart of the devotee which was created due to his past practice of bhakti. So that compassion probes him, do something, do something so that this person can take up to bhakti. So then he starts thinking, okay, what would please this person? Then comes the next stage, which is called as Mahat Seva, service to the devotees. Or it could be service to some element of bhakti. Even Prasada Seva is Seva. So then the devotee sees, okay, this person is from South India, and he might, there is a good probability that he might appreciate South Indian prasadam. So let me prepare, or let me approach someone who can prepare good quality South Indian prasadam, and I will invite this person for feast one day and feed him nice South Indian prasadam, and he might develop some appreciation. So if you invite that person and he honors that prasadam, he may not know that it is prasadam. He will just see, oh, here is a good friend who has invited me for some good food, and that too my regional food. Especially if that person happens to, that South Indian person happens to stay in a different place, foreign land like Maharashtra or somewhere. And there is a good chance that such a person will appreciate this offer. Oh, in Maharashtra I am getting good South Indian food. But what he happens to appreciate happens to have some connection with Krishna. It is Krishna Prasadam. So, by that appreciation, he gets what is called as Agyata Sukriti. This Agyata Sukriti is like if you have a piggy bank, like children are given piggy bank by their parents. They say that, okay, whatever money you get, you keep putting 1 rupee, 2 rupees, at least during my childhood days. It used to be 1 rupee, 2 rupees. Nowadays, those denominations have not much value. So then on my birthday or on Diwali, I could open that piggy bank or break that piggy bank, and whatever amount has been collected, I could use it for purchasing a gift for myself, or I could use it for purchasing a gift for someone else. So in the same way, every time, due to the merciful disposition of a devotee, when he creates an opportunity for a non-devotee to appreciate something connected with Krishna, and if he actually happens to appreciate, then he gets some Sukriti. And when this Sukriti accumulates and accumulates and accumulates and accumulates over many lifetimes, it actually transforms into what is called as Shraddha. Then that Shraddhavan need not immediately start practicing bhakti also. That Shraddhavan may take many years to actually start practicing bhakti. Like for example, I remember in 1999-2000, maybe around that time, I got introduced to devotees in India. And I immediately felt what these people are doing is right. Not immediately, over a period of time, I came to believe, trust that these people are good, these books are good, this parampara is bona fide, and the process is bona fide. But because of my weakness of heart, because I was very much attached to my own comfort zone, I never took up to the process. So Shraddha, I got Shraddha, but for that Shraddha to transform into Bhajana Kriya, it took 5 more years. And in a land thousands of miles away in the United States. So, in fact, Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, after Shraddha, he adds 2 more stages before Bhajana Kriya. He says, Guru Padashraya. One feels that, okay, I should accept a mentor, I should accept a guru. And then he gets Bhajaneshu Spriha. Bhajaneshu Spriha means a desire to practice Bhajana Kriya, Bhakti. Shravanam, Kirtanam, Vishnu, Smaranam, Padasevanam. So it is not that as soon as one gets the seed of faith, one immediately starts practicing, it may take some time between faith and actual practice of bhakti. That's what here Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur is indicating. So it all, how soon it transforms, it all depends on the kind of association that one gets. If it is a very powerful association, that stage of Shraddha to Bhajana Kriya may be very quick, or in some cases it may be very slow. So therefore, what devotees are trying to actually share as preaching, especially to new devotees, is they are just trying to share an opportunity for accumulating Agyat Sukriti, which may fructify in this lifetime or it may fructify in some future lifetime. So therefore, sometimes it may happen in our preaching endeavors that we go and we preach to someone and the very next day he starts chanting. And within a month or so he says, Prabhuji, I would like to accept you as my counselor. And we may end up thinking, maybe I am the next empowered incarnation in this world meant to deliver everyone. Maybe. I'm not denying that fact. There is a possibility. But the fact is, the person, in all likelihood, the person who came in touch with us probably had accumulated lot of Agyat Sukriti in the previous lifetimes and just needed 1% of Agyat Sukriti. He was already 99% ready. He wanted that just 1%. And we gave that 1% of association and he immediately took up to the process. He immediately became Shraddhavan and started Bhajana Kriya. Some other cases we may see that people coming to us for years, just eating prasadam and going away. Never interested in chanting, never interested in hearing. The moment you start speaking to them something related to Krishna, they will start yawning, or they may say, Prabhuji, I have some other work to do, and they may leave. And we may be wondering, what a waste of time, energy and money. So many plates of prasadam have been wasted. But it is never a waste. It is all, he is coming again and again to honor that prasadam because he has some appreciation for it. Any appreciation for anything connected to Krishna will definitely generate some Sukriti in him, and that Sukriti may mature any time. We do not know. It may not mature in our lifetime also. So therefore, it is just like in some cases, someone else may bake a cake, add some nice cream to it, what do you call that? Icing on it. And then that ready-made cake may come to us, we may just put the last cherry on it and then say, this is my cake, this is my counseli. But in all likelihood, someone else may have baked the cake, put the icing, written the name. We just put the cherry and owned the cake. In some other cases, we may be the ones who are baking the cake. We may put all the effort, years together, helping that person gain some Sukriti after Sukriti after Sukriti after Sukriti. 5 years we have invested. He never took up to the process. But then, one day he gets a transfer, he goes to some other city or some other country, and after few months he calls you, Prabhuji, you remember me? Now I have started chanting 16 rounds. And you know what? I have a counselor also. And then you are wondering, what? Counselor? I have put all the hard work and he has accepted someone else as the counselor. It happens. So as they say, the last straw that broke the camel's back. Once there was a camel which had the capacity to carry maximum of 100 kilograms. One day it was carrying already 100 kilograms weight. And it was really struggling to walk. And you put your own 1 kilogram bag on top of that on the back of the camel also. And suddenly its back breaks and it falls down. And you start thinking, oh, I am the cause of breaking the camel's back. But it is not like that. It is a cumulative effect. So therefore, in the preaching movement, we should understand that we can't take complete credit for any preaching effort. Any transformation that we have made in anyone's heart, we can't take complete credit. At the same time, if we are not very successful in helping people take up to actual practice of Krishna consciousness, we need not feel dejected as long as we are inspiring them to appreciate some aspect of bhakti, because we do not really know with how much sukriti each person is coming to us. This is true even in the case of very exalted devotees. Like we see even in the case of Srila Prabhupada. We hear about many of his disciples who were nicely practicing bhakti. But we do not hear about those people who all came for attending the program of Prabhupada, who used to eat prasadam but never took up to bhakti. There were actually many such people. Many such people. Some of them never took up to bhakti again, at least in this lifetime. Some of them 20 years later took initiation from Tamal Krishna Maharaj or Bhakti Charu Maharaj. Those kind of stories we get to hear. These were people who saw Prabhupada, met Prabhupada, heard from Prabhupada, ate from his hands, but still never developed the faith to practice bhakti. They were still demigod worshippers. They just appreciated Prabhupada as a good saintly person. But they were not convinced by the philosophy which he came to give. It took them 20 years to accumulate the rest of the sukriti needed to eventually become full-fledged devotees. So therefore, we should understand that what we are trying to distribute is not actually bhakti, but actually the raw material of bhakti, which is agyata sukriti. So if we have this understanding of preaching, so we have to redefine our definition of what is preaching. So preaching need not necessarily mean how many 16 rounders I have made. Preaching means it could be as simple as smiling at someone. So if someone appreciates your smiling and you happen to be a devotee, Krishna gives credit to that person. Okay, one agyat sukriti, because that person whom you appreciated is a devotee. So in this way, if we understand this broad understanding, if we have this broader understanding of preaching, that how it generates from, actually great souls always had such broader understanding of preaching. If you see a very wonderful story, I have shared this many times over. I heard this from one of my friends. So once His Holiness Bhakti Rasamrit Swami Maharaj was traveling in a car with one of his servants. And the car had to stop in a gas filling station, petrol filling station. And the person who was filling the car was just filling it. And in the meantime, Maharaj got down. He wanted to adjust his dhoti. So he had a bag in his hand. He gave that bag to that employee who was doing that job. Can you please hold it for a minute? I'll just adjust my dhoti. So the employee said, okay. And then he held that bag. Maharaj slowly adjusted his dhoti. And then after that, he took it back, gave him a smile, and he said, thank you very much. And that person was very pleased. He was visibly pleased. And the servant who had been watching all this, he got thoroughly confused. He was thinking, I am his servant. I have been traveling with him. And it's not that I was in the middle of doing something else when Maharaj needed this help. He could have given that bag to me. He could have at least put that bag inside the car. why did he have to give that bag to that employee? So this was really troubling the personal servant. Anyway, the journey continued, and the servant was becoming, he could not tolerate and this urge. And eventually he did ask Maharaj, Maharaj, I have this doubt and it's troubling me a lot. Can you please explain? Why did you have to give this bag to that employee? So Maharaj said, look, this route that we are taking, there are not many temples here. We do not know when would be the next time a devotee will be passing through this road. Even if he may pass through this road, whether he will exactly come to fill petrol in this gas station or not, we do not know. And even if he may come, whether this person will come and fill the car, fill the petrol, and whether he will get an opportunity to serve Vaishnavas or not, we do not know. So, this is one opportunity that we had to give him an opportunity to come one step closer to Krishna. In all probability, Maharaj probably knew that he would never get an opportunity to again meet this person ever in life. He may not necessarily take up to bhakti, accept Maharaj as his spiritual master or anything. But he thought preaching means here is an opportunity. I can give him an experience of having a very favorable experience in Krishna consciousness. One Sukriti gained, my day is successful. So if we have this broader understanding of preaching, then we will never become proud of what we could accomplish in preaching, because we will always know someone else has baked the cake. We will never feel very proud. So many Vaishnavas have contributed to this person accumulating the necessary Sukriti to take up to bhakti. And at the same time, we may not necessarily become despondent if we are not able to come up with the numbers. So many 16 rounders, so many people joined the ashram because of me. That is very good. That does not, no one is taking that credit away from them. But one should always understand that in order to create that transformation in the heart of that person, so many other Vaishnavas over many lifetimes have contributed to it. So one should always be acknowledging to that fact. So therefore, no sincere endeavor in Krishna consciousness goes waste. Like that. So, now we come to the one last interesting point that we need to understand. We never discussed about the will of the receiving jiva, because ultimately it is the receiver who is receiving that seed of bhakti. Does his will play a role at all? Because one of the meanings of yadrichaya is independent will of the living entity who is receiving that bhakti. So his independent will, does it play a role at all? If you explore this proposition, actually independent will of the receiver means he decides, oh, this bhakti is good, I will accept it. The moment he feels this way, he already has bhakti. He already has faith in bhakti. Only one who has prior faith in bhakti will actually willingly want bhakti. So therefore, you cannot say that the receiver, that the receiving jiva's free will is a cause. But one may say, okay, Prabhu, I was distributing khichdi the other day. One person I gave it, he willingly took that khichdi and asked for more. The other person I was distributing khichdi, he was telling, you have only khichdi, you don't have something else, and he did not take that khichdi. So now, this person has utilized his free will to reject the opportunity to take up to bhakti. He has rejected the opportunity to take up, to accumulate some agyat sukriti. So the free will of the receiver plays a role. But actually if you see, the person who accepted it and the person who rejected it, both were under the three modes. Free will means when a person acts on the platform of right and wrong. If the person is acting on the platform of likes and dislikes, so the first person accepted khichdi because he likes it. The second person rejected khichdi because probably he was not hungry enough, and he anyway did not like khichdi that much. So likes and dislikes are shaped by the three modes. If in the place of khichdi, if the person had distributed some samosas, probably the second person would have taken. So the first person rejected it, the first person took it because probably he had some sattvaguni disposition. Therefore, when he saw that sattvic khichdi, he got attracted. The second person probably had a more slightly rajoguni disposition. Therefore, when he saw that spicy samosas with that spicy green chilli chutney, he got attracted. So in the first case, the acceptance of that person, the first person, was governed by not the free will of the living entity, but sattvagun. And in the second case, the acceptance of samosa or the rejection of khichdi was not according to the free will of the living entity, but it was orchestrated by rajogun. So therefore, when the question of free will comes only when the person is choosing to act on the platform of some value system which says this is right, this is wrong. In the first case, both these first person and second person were accepting or rejecting, being inspired by likes and dislikes which were shaped by the three modes. There is no value system there. Where there is no value system, there is no question of exercising free will. Like for example, you do not tell your child, do you have the willpower to keep checking your WhatsApp messages and keep watching YouTube videos throughout the day? You don't talk to your child like that, because that is a natural disposition. The moment there is nothing to do, immediately the child or even adults in today's day and age will pick up their smartphone and keep on browsing something or watching some YouTube video. You can't say that, oh see, he has tremendous willpower to keep watching YouTube videos. You don't say that, because that act is not performed out of willpower. That act is performed due to the pushing of the modes. But when you say willpower, when you ask your child, my dear child, I know you want to get into IIT. Do you have the willpower to sit and study 10 hours every day? This is reasonable, because the child has identified a value system. Oh, getting into IIT is very good. So for that, what do I need to do? 10 hours minimum studies every day. So then, with respect to that value system, the living entity can exercise his free will. So here the living entity does not know anything about bhakti. He does not know the glory of bhakti. He does not value bhakti. He does not think that bhakti is something very good. He just has some attraction to some khichdi or some music or some friends. And all that attraction is completely controlled by the three modes. So there is no scope for exercising free will. So therefore you cannot say free will of the receiver is a cause. Actually it is the independent will of the devotee who is sharing that message, that is the whole and sole cause. And that mercy which he is sharing is Krishna's mercy. Therefore, Guru Krishna Prasade Pai Bhaktilata Bij. So this is how a living entity receives the seed of devotion. So this is the discussion that Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti presents as the first theme after Mangalacharan, how does one receive the seed of devotion? And what is this seed of devotion? Shraddha, faith with its 4 components. How does one get it? We saw Mahat Kripa. Mahat Kripa, the Vaishnava feels very compassionate and then he engages that other person in some seva, Mahat Seva. Then it leads to accumulation of some Agyata Sukriti, and when this Agyata Sukriti is accumulated over many lifetimes, it matures into what is called as Shraddha. And that Shraddha is the seed. Guru Krishna Prasade Pai Bhakti Lata Bij. That is that seed. So this is the third theme actually we discussed. First theme was Mangalacharan. Second theme was how the highest understanding of the absolute truth is Akhila Rasamrita Murti. And the third theme that we discussed was how does one receive the seed of bhakti. Now, the fourth theme that we will start discussing today is a continuation of what we have already discussed. Bhakti is not caused by any other processes. You may say, yes, this is true, already you have mentioned. Bhakti is ahaituki. Ahaituki means it is either causeless or self-causative. And in this context we saw it is self-causative. But to emphasize this point, you should not think again that, bhakti can be generated by piety. If someone has already practiced Varnashram very nicely, then he has a better chance of taking up to bhakti. Or if someone has practiced the path of Jnana Yoga or Ashtanga Yoga, he has practiced 20 years of solid Ashtanga Yoga. If he comes to bhakti, he will immediately take up to bhakti. Not necessary. So, in order to re-emphasize this point, again Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti emphasizes on this point. He says, through many scriptural statements, one can understand that the Lord appears by his own will. There are like Svechavatara Charitaihi, Svechamayasya. Like that in Bhagavatam there are many instances where it is mentioned about the appearance of the Supreme Lord, that the Lord always appears by his independent sweet will, by his independent free will. Still, many people who do not have that transcendental vision, who do not have that transcendental faith, may think that there is some material circumstance which forces the Supreme Lord to appear. Like for example, you see even in Bhagavad Gita, Krishna himself says, Yada yada hi dharmasya glanir bhavati bharata abhyuttanam adharmasya tadatmanam srijamyaham. He says, whenever there is a destruction of dharma, dharmasya glani or adharmasya abhyuttanam or increase of adharma, at that time I appear. So one should not think that, clearly it mentions, if there is a decline in religion and an increase in irreligion, then Krishna is forced to appear. Is Krishna forced to appear? No. Krishna chooses to appear. And he says, Paritranaya sadhunam vinashaya cha dushkritam dharma samsthapanarthaya sambhavami yuge yuge. Again the word yuge yuge is mentioned. So yuge yuge means in every yuga. So is it like time forces Krishna to appear? So it may seem like that. So neither does time force Krishna to appear, nor does a material circumstance, but it is solely the independent free will of the Lord. So yuge yuge means time, every yuga, and Prabhupada also mentions that if you want to evaluate a particular avatara, if someone claims himself to be an avatara, you have to check the scriptures, because the scriptures indicate at what time this avatara is expected to appear. So does it mean that time or the scriptural injunctions force the Supreme Lord to appear at particular times? Krishna says, Kalosmi lokakshayakrit pravruddho, he says in the 11th chapter of Bhagavad Gita. Arjuna, Kalosmi, I am Kala. So therefore, if Krishna himself is time, time is just, in fact, it is an understatement to say Krishna is time. Krishna is actually one insignificant, time is actually one insignificant energy of Krishna. Krishna is not time. Time is one insignificant energy of Krishna. It is one of his vibhutis. It is one of his energies, Kala Shakti. And scriptures, do scriptures dictate Krishna when to come? Krishna says, Vedaischa sarvam ahameva vedyo vedantakrit vedaviteva chaham. Oh Arjuna, I am Vedantakrit, I am the compiler of Vedas. Vedavit, I am the knower of Vedas. In fact, through all the Vedas, I am to be known. So therefore, Krishna's appearance is not dictated by time. It is not dictated by scriptures. Krishna dictates the scriptures. And it is not dictated by material circumstances. Even though from a very superficial level it may seem like these things are dictating Krishna's appearance. You see, exactly at the time of creation, Garbhodak Sai Vishnu will come, he will enter the universe. Exactly at the time of creation, Karanodak Sai Vishnu will release the universes from the pores of his body. And exactly after creation, Kshirodaka Sai Vishnu will expand and appear as Paramatma in every living entity's heart. So, from the observation, it seems like these personalities are completely subservient to time and circumstances. But no, Krishna's free will is always there, and his expansion's free will is also there whenever they appear. And Mother Kunti also describes this in our prayers in Bhagavatam. She says, different people say different thing about your appearance, O Krishna. Kechid ahur ajam jatam punya shlokasya kirtaye yadoho priyashravasyaanye malayasyeva chandanam. Some say, my dear Krishna, that you appear because in order to give fame to Yudhishthir Maharaj, or you have appeared to give fame to the Yadus. Apare vasudevasya devakyam yachito bhyagad ajastvam masya shemaya vadhaya cha suradvisham. Some say that but that Vasudeva and Devaki requested you to appear, that is the reason you appeared. It is true, Vasudeva and Devaki did request for Krishna to appear, but at the same time, Krishna chose to appear. Krishna chose to respond to their request. Krishna was not forced, but Krishna chose to respond to the request of Vasudeva and Devaki. So therefore, the independent will of the Supreme Lord is never challenged. He may voluntarily surrender his independent will to the devotee, but under no circumstances the Supreme Lord's independent will is ever challenged. Some others say that when earth became overburdened due to sinful kings like Kamsa, Shishupal and all others, Mother Earth went and prayed to Brahmaji, and Brahmaji along with all the incarnations, all the demigods, they went to the shore of the milk ocean and they offered prayers to Kshirodaka Sai Vishnu, and then Kshirodaka Sai Vishnu agreed that okay, I will come in my form as Krishna. So someone may say, oh, this plea by Brahmaji is the cause. Bharavataranya anye bhuvo nava ivo dadau Sidantya buri barena jato hi atma bhuva artitaha. Atma bhuva artitaha. Being pleaded, Brahma's plea became the cause of Krishna's appearance. No. Krishna chose to respond to the plea of Brahmaji. So even though it is very clear in the scriptures that Krishna's appearance is always dependent on his own free will, still people who are not cognizant of the conclusions of the scriptures may conclude that Krishna is subservient to time, material circumstances and all that. In the same way, even though sometimes the scriptures it may seem like bhakti is caused by piety, bhakti is caused by karma yoga, bhakti is caused by jnana yoga, but one should always understand that Bhakti Devi is similarly supremely independent and she is not at all dependent on karma, jnana, yoga, etc. In the same way, sometimes it is said that the prescribed activities performed without personal motives acts as a door to bhakti. Sometimes they say Nishkama Karma Yoga causes bhakti. But, and actually they say means not someone says, actually the scriptures may seem to indicate that way. But one should understand their relative nature. What does it mean? He says, he gives an example from the 11th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, where the example he will give in the next verse, but here he says, one should clearly understand that charity, austerities or any other pious practices are denied clearly as the causes of bhakti in the 11th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, where Krishna tells Uddhava himself in Uddhava Gita. He says, Yamna yogena sankyena dana vrata tapo advaraihi vyakya swadhyaya sannyasaihi prapnuyad yatnavanapi. Even though one may greatly endeavor to perform charity, yoga, the practice jnana yoga or ashtanga yoga, or he may give in charity, or he may perform some vows, austerities, anything, but he cannot get bhakti to me. This is what categorical statement by Krishna to Uddhava in the 11th canto. But at the same time, there is an exact opposite verse in the 10th canto, one canto before, where it is mentioned, Dana vrato tapo homa japa swadhyaya samyamaihi shreyobir vividaischa anyaihi krishne bhaktir hi sadhyate. This is exact opposite verse. It says one can attain Krishna bhakti, krishne bhaktir hi sadhyate. How? Dana, vrata, tapo, homa, those very same things which were rejected as being causes of bhakti in the very previous verse that was quoted. This verse says one can get Krishna bhakti through these paths. How do we understand this? Which is right? Which is wrong? So the Acharyas explain that there are two ways of understanding this. So one is that there is Shuddha Bhakti or Nirguna Bhakti, which is beyond three modes, which can be attained, one which is actually Ahaituki, which has no material cause. Whereas there is Mishra Bhakti, mixed devotional faith, so which is called as Satviki Bhakti. So this Satviki Bhakti actually can be, which acts as a limb of karma, jnana or yoga. This can be attained by these other practices of dana, tapa, yoga, homa, etc. But the Nirguna Prema Bhakti, that can never be attained by any of these material practices. It can be attained only by the mercy of the devotee. This is one understanding. So what is mentioned in this 10th canto verse about bhakti can be attained by dana, tapo, yoga, etc. It refers to the Satviki Bhakti and it is not referring to the pure devotional seed. The second understanding is, there is nothing wrong in this statement. Charity means giving charity to Vishnu and giving charity to Vaishnavas. Actually, this is a limb of bhakti. Vrata means Ekadashi Vrata. Tapa means Bhogadityaga Krishnasya Hetave. Srila Rupa Goswami mentions in Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, of the 64 items, one of the most important items is giving up sense gratification for the pleasure of Krishna. So this is austerity. So if you define charity, austerity and tapasya, or in terms of giving charity to Vishnu, in terms of fasting on Ekadashi, or in terms of giving up sense gratification to please Krishna. So in this case, if you define in this way, then all of these are limbs of bhakti only. So therefore, by performing this limb of bhakti, if one gets bhakti, this is not incongruent, this is not wrong. Thus, they are all limbs of sadhana bhakti. To say that bhakti is attained by these angas, it is not incorrect. For this simply means that sadhya bhakti is attained by sadhana bhakti. Like that. In this way, the causeless nature of bhakti is again concluded and all contradictory points are settled. There is no contradiction here. It is very clear that this is how one gets bhakti. Bhakti is ahaituki, it is self-causative. No other material process can cause bhakti. But here when we say bhakti, we refer to pure devotional service, unadulterated, unmotivated devotional service. This has no material cause. The next theme that Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur discusses is, rather it is bhakti which supports the other processes. So it is not, bhakti does not need the support of any other process, but bhakti supports all the other processes. In fact, none of the other processes can stand alone without bhakti. The Shastras are replete with quotes to substantiate this point. And Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur gives a few quotations here. He quotes this verse from the 10th canto. Shreyas sritim bhakti mudasya te vibho klishyantiye kevala bodha labdaye tesham asau kleshala eva shishyate nanyad yatastula tushava gatinam. He says, this is Brahmaji offering prayers to the Supreme Lord Krishna after Krishna appears. Oh, this is after the Brahma Vimohan Leela. Brahmaji is offering these prayers to Krishna. He says, Shreyas sritim bhakti mudasya te vibho. One who gives up this auspicious path of bhakti and tries to attain perfection by practicing the path of jnana with no element of bhakti. He says, such a person is stula tushava gatinam. It is like beating empty husks. After the rice has already been removed from the husk, how much ever you may beat, no rice is going to come out of it. Which means it is without the support of bhakti, jnana cannot stand. Another famous verse from the first canto of Srimad Bhagavatam. Tyaktva swadharmam charanam bhujam harer bhajan apakvo atapate tato yadi yatrakva vabhadram abhud amushya kim kovarta apto abhajatam swadharmatah. Krishna says, here Narada Muni is telling to Vyasadeva, if one gives up his varnashram duties, swadharmam, and charanam bhujam harer bhajan, and worships the lotus feet of Lord Hari, and apakvo atapate tato yadi, and eventually gives up that process also. Yeah? Either he may happen to deviate, or he may happen to, before reaching perfection, he may give up his body. Krishna says, Yatrakva vabhadram abhut amushya. What does he lose? He does not lose anything. Kovarta apto abhajatam swadharmatah. But if a person may perfectly practice all varnashram duties, but if he does not worship Vishnu, what does he gain? He does not gain anything. So the first statement indicates that the support of varnashram duties or the support of one's karma is not needed for bhakti. Bhakti is independent. And the second statement indicates that, but karma cannot stand without the support of bhakti. So bhakti supports everything, but bhakti does not need any support. Another verse he quotes from the same prayers by Brahmaji. Pureha bhuman bahavopi yoginas tvadarpiteha nijakarma labdaye vibudya bhaktiyaiva katanopanitaya prapedire anjo achyutate gatim param. So Brahmaji says, there have been many yogis who have practiced the path of bhakti, who have practiced the path of Ashtanga Yoga along with some bhakti, and they attained supreme perfection. He says, Vibudya bhaktiyaiva katopanitaya. Only by even though their practice included the limbs of Ashtanga Yoga, Yama, Niyama, Asana, Pranayama, Pratyahara, Dharana, Dhyana and Samadhi. But at the same time, they also had practiced some limbs of bhakti, Shravanam, Kirtanam, Smaranam, etc. Katopanitaya. Vibudya Bhaktya Eva. They attained perfection. Here, Brahmaji says, they all attained perfection only because they performed those limbs of bhakti, not because of Ashtanga Yoga. So therefore, that path of Ashtanga Yoga also needs the support of bhakti. We saw one quote for how the Jnana Yoga needs the support of bhakti, then one quote for how Karma Yoga needs the support of bhakti, and this verse indicates how Ashtanga Yoga also needs the support of bhakti. Without the support of bhakti, none of these processes can achieve perfection. So therefore, but for the accomplishment of prema, the goal of bhakti, bhakti does not need the support of Karma Jnana Yoga at all. This is very clear. Therefore, Krishna declares again in Uddhava Gita in the 11th canto, Tasman madbhakti yuktasya yogino vai madatmanah na jnanam na cha vairagyam praya shreyo bhavediha. My dear Uddhava, please understand that for a person who is trying to attain success in bhakti, neither karma nor jnana nor vairagya nor yoga is the means of attaining success. It is only bhakti that is the cause of success. Another verse he quotes from the same Uddhava Gita, Ajñayaiva gunan doshan mayadishtan apiswakan dharman santyajya yassarvan mam bhajet satu sattama. This is the Uddhava Gita version of Sarvadharman parityajya mamekam sharanam vraja aham tvam sarvapapebhyo mokshayishyami. Here Krishna told Arjuna, here Krishna is telling Uddhava, my dear Uddhava, in my opinion, that person who has given up all considerations of dharma and he is acting only for my pleasure, who is only practicing the limbs of bhakti, of all the human beings, I consider that person to be the most exalted. So therefore, Krishna is making it very clear that not only bhakti does not need the support of karma, jnana and yoga, but actually bhakti without the mixture of karma, jnana and yoga is actually the most potent process. Actually adding karma, jnana and yoga to bhakti is like adulterating the foods with unwanted things. So what to speak of giving additional support, actually that bhakti becomes weak because of karma, jnana, yoga, etc. So therefore, one should understand that bhakti is not at all even the least contingent on the practice of karma, jnana and yoga. Rather, it is bhakti which gives support to all the other processes. And in fact, whatever can be achieved by karma, jnana, yoga can be achieved by practicing only bhakti. No need for karma, jnana, yoga also. Again, Uddhava Gita, Krishna tells Uddhava, Yat karmabir, yat tapasa, jnana vairagyatascha yogena dana dharmena shreyobir itarairapi sarvam madbhakti yogena madbhakta labate anjasa swarga apavarga maddama katanchid yadi vanchati. Krishna says, whatever can be achieved by karma, jnana, yoga, tapasya, etc. Sarvam madbhakti yogena madbhakta labate anjasa. My devotee can very easily attain it just by practicing bhakti. So, if you think in order to achieve swarga you need to practice karma, no need. By bhakti, by Navada bhakti you can attain swarga. If you think you have to practice jnana or ashtanga yoga to attain impersonal Brahma Jyoti, no need. You can practice bhakti, Navada bhakti and attain it. And for attaining prema, definitely you have to practice Navada bhakti. Akama sarvakamova mokshakama udaradihi tivrena bhakti yogena yajeta purusham param. Whether you have all material desires or no material desires, or if you desire liberation, just by practicing Navada bhakti you can achieve that perfection. And he quotes another verse from Hari Bhakti Sudhodai. Bhagavad Bhakti Heenasya Jati Shastram Japastapa Apranasya Dehasya Mandanam Lokaranjanam. Very often quoted by Srila Prabhupada also in his lectures. He says that without Bhagavad Bhakti, any practice of Karma Jnana Yoga or good birth or study of scriptures, everything is like decoration on a dead body. How much ever you may decorate a dead body, it might look beautiful, but after some time it will rot. Similarly, any practice of Karma Jnana Yoga or charity, etc., without the element of bhakti, will not give any tangible result to the practitioner. Thus, without bhakti, all these endeavors become fruitless. As the body depends on the presence of the soul, the very life of jnana, karma and yoga depends on the supremely exalted Bhakti Devi. So this is the conclusion that Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur gives here. The next theme, probably which will be the last theme that we will get to discuss today because we are running short of time, is that how even though bhakti being such an exalted path, interestingly does not depend on purity, does not depend on faith. This is a very, very confusing. If you have some very valuable thing, generally it is, to attain it becomes very, very difficult. But how could this bhakti, which has been proven to be the most valuable commodity, how is it that it does not depend on purity? It does not depend on faith. Whereas karma, jnana, yoga, everything depends on purity and faith. And how can you say, that will come little later. He says that we all know that how practice of karma, it needs purity. The ingredients have to be pure. The brahmanas have to be pure. They have to chant the mantras purely. Only then the desired result will come. Otherwise, no result will come, or in worst case, opposite result might come. So, practice of karma to a large extent depends on purity. And practice of jnana we will come little later. But for bhakti, it is not dependent on purity. At least not all the limbs. Of course, for archana and other such processes, some element of purity is definitely needed. But for remembering Krishna, nothing. For chanting his holy names, nothing. Namna makari bahuda nija sarva shaktis tattar pita niyamita smaranena kalaha. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu says, there is no fixed time, there is no hard and fast rule. Anyone can chant. And he quotes this verse, na desha niyamas tatra na kala nirnayas tada na uchishtadau nishedo asti Shri Harer namni lubdake. It is mentioned in chanting the holy name of the Lord, for one who is greedy to chant the holy name of the Lord, na desha niyamas tatra. You can chant at any place. Srila Gaur Kishore Das Babaji Maharaj, just to avoid disturbance of ordinary materialistic people, he would go and stand near a public toilet and chant. Na desha niyamas tatra, na kala nirnayas tata. For performing particular activities which fall within the realm of karma, you have to see your proper time. You cannot do it in the Rahu Kala, and there is something called Yamagandam, and there is something called, lot of inauspicious times are there. You cannot do it during those times. You have to look for the proper muhurta to perform. But for practicing bhakti, na desha niyamas tatra, na kala nirnayas tata, na uchishtadau nishedo asti. And there is no restriction in terms of impurity. This is one thing. And it says, bhakti is not even dependent on faith. This is contradictory, one may say. You just said that bhakti means, you can say someone is a bhakta only if he has faith. Faith is a prerequisite for bhakti. Yes, you can tell that someone is a devotee only if he has faith. But even if without faith, if he performs that activity, he will come one step closer to acquiring that faith. Say for example, we saw so many examples. Let's say if someone eats prasadam, appreciates that prasadam, not knowing that it is prasadam. So he has no faith in prasadam. In fact, one of the important aspects of faith is to have faith in prasadam. We chant this every day. Mahaprasade Govinde Nama Brahmani Vaishnave Swalpa Punyavatam Rajan Vishwaso Neva Jayate. For those who have Swalpa Punya, for those who have Swalpa Sukriti, very meager Agyat Sukriti, they cannot understand the glory of Mahaprasade. First thing is Mahaprasad, they cannot understand the glory of Mahaprasad. Govinde, they cannot understand the exclusive glory of the Supreme Lord. Nama Brahmani, they cannot understand the glory of the holy name. They will think, oh, this is just another name. And Vaishnave, they may not have some specific appreciation for Vaishnavas. These are all a product of faith. But even if these four things, you come in touch with the deity form of the Lord and appreciate for, oh, what sculpture, very beautifully sculpted figure, you may say. You may not appreciate it for that being the Lord. And someone may appreciate prasadam because, oh, very nicely cooked, not because it is prasadam. Someone may appreciate a Vaishnava because, oh, he's a very nice gentleman, not because he's a devotee of the Lord. And someone may similarly appreciate the holy name also. Oh, very nice tune, this tune is very good. The person who is singing is very nicely singing it. Like that. So the appreciation is not for the spiritual element in it, but only for the material aspect. But even that can give sukriti, which can eventually become faith. Therefore, it is true that only when a person possesses faith, you can call him a bhakta. But even without faith, if the elements of bhakti are performed without faith, but with little appreciation, it can generate faith. It is a self-generating process. So in this way, bhakti does not depend on faith also. He quotes a verse from the Padma Puran. He says, Sakritapi parigeetam shraddaya helayava Bhruguvara naramatram tarayet Krishna nama. Padma Puran says that Sakritapi parigeetam, even if one chants once, shraddaya helayava, with faith or without proper faith, tarayet Krishna nama. Krishna nama definitely bestows the good results on that person. So for a person who chants with faith, he goes one step closer to the lotus feet of Krishna. And for one who chants without faith, he gets sukriti. Furthermore, bhakti is not dependent on purity of practice. For whether the name is chanted purely or impurely, it will deliver the fallen soul. If you chant purely or impurely, the fallen soul will be delivered. He may not get Krishna prem, but even impure chanting can actually take one till liberation. It is possible. But the same cannot be said of karma yoga, where impurity can possess, when impurity can create a great obstacle. Like for example, it is mentioned, mantrahina swarato varnato va mita prayukto natam artam aha yatendra shatru swarato aparadat sa vagvajro yajamanam hinasti. So he is giving the example of Twashta. So Twashta Rishi, you all know this story from the 6th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam. So Twashta Rishi, due to some circumstances which we will not get into, he wanted to kill Indra. So he performed a great sacrifice. Everything went on perfectly. But the priest, while chanting the mantras, made a small intonation mistake. Intonation is not even pronunciation. One particular syllable was for a few nanoseconds more they stretched it. Indra Shatru. So instead of that sacrifice giving birth to a person who would kill Indra, that sacrifice gave birth to a person who would be killed by Indra, which was Vritrasur. So this was a Karmakandiya Yajna, one very small insignificant mistake and opposite result. But in bhakti, these kind of insignificant results, insignificant mistakes or even grave mistakes. For example, we see in China people cannot chant the syllable Ra. But many devotees from China, many people have taken up to devotional service in China. And if you see, every word of the 16-word Mahamantra has Ra in it. Hare, Krishna, Rama. All three have Ra. But they cannot pronounce Ra, which means every word of the Mahamantra they are mispronouncing. They chant Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Lama, Lama Lama, Hare Hare. This is how they chant. Because they are not used to chanting Ra at all. Do you think Krishna will penalize them for this? No. What to speak of intonation, what to speak of pronunciation, every single word is mispronounced by people coming from this particular region. But Krishna does not take it seriously because bhakti is not dependent on such inadvertent mistakes. Bhakti is completely about one's intent. Whereas the Karma Yoga, Jnana Yoga, etc., they are very much dependent on the actual practice, purity of practice, purity of place, internal purity. You cannot practice Jnana Yoga before having a completely purified heart. One must have prior practiced Nishkama Karma Yoga and completely purified the heart before even becoming qualified for practicing Jnana Yoga. So purity is an absolute prerequisite for Jnana Yoga. And even the later stages of Ashtanga Yoga also, in order to be able to meditate on the Paramatma form of the Lord, purity of heart is a complete prerequisite. So therefore, Karma, Jnana, Yoga, all of them are dependent on purity, but Bhakti is the only process which is not dependent on a purified heart. Rather, Bhakti purifies everyone's heart. So, therefore, it is mentioned in Srimad Bhagavatam that if a Jnana Yogi falls back to material activities, he is criticized as a Vantashi. Vantashi means one who eats his own vomit. So a Jnana Yogi means a sannyasi who has given up the Varnashram because of achieving purification of heart by practice of Varnashram duties. But if due to some miscalculation, he gives it up prematurely and again falls back to the material plane, he is severely criticized in the Shastras. He is socially ostracized as a person who eats his own vomit. But if you see, devotees, they are not criticized if they fall trapped to lust, anger, envy, greed, illusion and pride, because the process is capable of purifying their heart. What to speak of that even Bhagavatam in describing the Falashruti of Rasalila in the 10th chapter, in the 10th canto says, Vikriditam Vrajavadu Biridam cha Vishnor Shraddhanvito Anushruniyad Ata Varnayedyah Bhaktim Param Bhagavatam Pratilabhya Kamam Hridrogamashu Apahinoti Achirena Dhira. It is mentioned that anyone who with faith chants this episode or hears this episode, Hridrogam Ashu Apahinoti. Bhaktim Param Bhagavati Pratilabhya Kamam. He attains Prema Bhakti and his heart becomes completely freed of lust. So therefore, it means while engaging on the path of Bhakti, one's heart may still be afflicted with anarthas. So Bhakti can not only tolerate anarthas, Bhakti can destroy anarthas. Whereas the other practices have limited or no tolerance of anarthas. So, And furthermore, even if such impurities occur within the heart of devotees, they are not criticized for it. In fact, Krishna himself criticizes a person who would criticize a devotee for having impurities within his heart. He says, Api chet suduracharo bhajate ma mananyabhak sadureva samantavya samyak vyavasito hisaha. He says, don't criticize a devotee who may be struggling due to his own past conditionings. Sadhureva samantavya. I consider him as a sadhu. Why do you have to criticize him? Like that, Krishna is very severe on such a person. And another very beautiful verse from the 11th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, Uddhava Gita, Krishna tells Uddhava, Bhadyamanopi madbhakto vishayair ajitendriyaihi prayah pragalbaya bhaktya vishayair nabi bhuyate. So Krishna says, madbhaktaha, my devotee, ajitendriya, he may not have sense control. Vishayair bhadyamanaha api, and he may be harassed by material desires. Prayah pragalbaya bhaktya, but because of his generally strong practice of bhakti. Generally strong means when he is harassed by material desires and when he is succumbing to it, his bhakti is very weak. But once he comes back to his senses, he starts practicing bhakti properly. Prayah pragalbaya bhaktya vishayair na vibhuyate. That sincere practice of bhakti will save him from his accidental fall downs due to lust, anger, envy, greed, illusion and pride. So therefore, we should understand that bhakti does not depend on purity or faith. Ajamil did not chant with faith. But still the Yamadutas came, Yamadutas did come, and the Vishnudutas came and still protected Ajamil from Yamaduta, even though he chanted without faith and he did not even address the Supreme Lord, he was calling for his own son Narayan. So therefore, one should understand that this internal purity and external purity and purity of place, materials, etc., they are prerequisites for karma, jnana and yoga, but they are not prerequisites for bhakti. So therefore, one should understand this theme properly. So bhakti is completely independent and it does not require any other means for its execution, and it is not obstructed by inadvertent faults or lack of any completeness. So this is the sixth theme that we discussed in this first chapter. So tomorrow, Krishna willing, we will complete the rest of the chapter and probably move on to the next chapter also. So thank you very much for your patient listening again. You have made your presence has made the second day very successful and auspicious. If you found something interesting but lacking clarity and you seek some clarification, please go to your chat box and type your questions. Or if you could not type the questions in your chat box, you can even type it in the comments box, and in the next day for the third day discussion, I will, just before starting that day's discussion, I will address all the questions to the best of my ability. So again, I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart for taking your time out and hearing this subject matter. Thank you very much. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur ki jai. Shri Madhurya Kadambini ki